You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Shoe Radio, the Footwear Industries podcast, Shoe In Show, where we talk about all things footwear, just like that lady's voice said a few seconds ago. Matt, are you with us?
I'm here, my friend. That lady's voice reminds us constantly that this is the ins and outs of all things footwear, for which we are the insiders.
Well, somebody made that up, I guess, because insiders, I don't know. I guess so. I guess it's up to us to really.
Hey, if you say it, the people will repeat it. It'll be
That's
true.
right.
True. And we are all inside for the foreseeable future. So,
Right. Anyway, so welcome to the number one rated shoe podcast on the business side in the history of mankind. Worldwide number one. I declare it. It must be so.
Exactly.
On today's episode, Matt was recently working with a company, and there was a report that came out that we want to talk about today and really dive into. As many of our loyal listeners know, we are constantly, when we talk about consumer behavior, consumer trends, we constantly challenge people to go a little bit deeper. There's so much. When we talk about consumers, people always start with like a monolith, I would say, and they don't go into the diverse side of all things consumer. And we try to really get into that on this show. And I think this episode is really kind of dedicated to that, looking specifically, I think, Matt, at the millennial consumer.
Yeah, Andy. So I was at an event a couple weeks ago, and I heard a speaker, Casey Lowball, who is an executive at Deloitte. And he did a great job of talking about a report that Deloitte put out last year that is entitled "The Consumer is Changing, but Perhaps Not How You Think." And the reason I really gravitated towards what Casey had to say was the fact that we always have these collective narratives that you mentioned, Andy, that we just kind of adopt as gospel, and we don't really critically think about them as maybe what the stuff I'm being fed is actually not true, or it might be true, but the reasons behind it are not as advertised. And so as I started to hear what Casey was talking about as it relates to millennials, and millennials like experiences, and millennials are this and that, and he started to talk to the real reasons behind consumer behavior right now, I really was like, man, we got to talk about this on Shoe In, because one, Andy does a great job of like critical thought and breaking down assumptions, and two, it's just a very interesting topic in a time when we're trying to think through how the consumer behaves.
Yeah, I think the challenge is it's so easy. One might say lazy, but it's so easy to compare generation to generation. There's like a delineated marker by decade, right? So the 80s, 90s, 2000s. The challenge is you're talking about products that are completely different. So yeah, shoes in the 80s may, it serves the same purpose today, right? To protect our feet as we walk. But the product's completely different. There's completely new innovations to it. There's completely new channels to it. The costs are completely different. So we're talking about, baby boomers spending this amount of money on this. Well, I mean, if we were talking about TVs, I would have to laugh you out of the room because, I just got a flat screen, 50-inch for like $200.
Oh, snap.
Oh, no. But if I had to get the same thing in the 1960s and watch Leave It to Beaver, it'd be like $2,000. So how do you compare that then, right? Like you actually have to have deeper analysis of product, deeper analysis of the pressures consumers face today is different than the pressures of the past, both economically and social, I think to a certain extent. And if you want to tee it off and jump into a few flash facts, I'll happily tear into a Polk pontification on what I think is probably not correct, but nonetheless will be entertaining.
Exactly. Much like our world ranking on podcasts. All right. So flash facts. So before we get started with our flash facts, I wanted to kind of just lay out the approach they took in the report, and everyone can find this. They just have to Google Deloitte, the consumer is changing, and it will come up. They undertook, and I'm quoting from the report here, we undertook a year-long journey to study the consumer. We scoured government data, talked to clients, industry leaders, and analysts, conducted primary interviews, and surveyed a representative sample of more than 4,000 consumers from the U.S. And then it goes on to talk more about the way they approached it. And what it boils down to is that consumer behavior, the way we buy things, we do things as consumers, not based on our age group. We do it based on our economic standing. And so out there, you might have boomers that are acting like millennials. If you were to use the old construct of millennials like experiences, you might have millennials acting like boomers. You might have Gen Xs acting like both in the same day. And it has nothing to do with their age. It has far more to do with their income and their status in life and those kinds of things. And so millennials actually are doing things very similar to boomers when they were millennials, but it's not because of their age. And I think that was kind of the first red flag that went up in my mind, that we're just taught that because you're a certain age, you're going to act a certain way, but that's actually not the case.
Well, I understand why people want to segment that way, because it's easier, right? You can segment different categories that way and deliver different products to different people that way. But you're right. I mean, ultimately, it's not everybody fits into the same category and age. I mean, you could be a millionaire at 15 now as an influencer on YouTube and have enough money to buy whatever you wanted and do whatever you wanted, versus someone who just saw their net, retirement decrease because of the market drop, and now might have to work for another year or two and can't afford something that you would assume, somebody who might be 60 or 62 years old could more easily afford because they have paid off their house or their car or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But the reason why it stands out is because everybody has been buying into this age-based consumer instead of slicing the numbers and analyzing it any number of different ways, which are probably more accurate.
Yeah, so let's put a finer point on that notion that you raised, Andy. If you look, according to the report, if you look at millennials' share of wallet now versus what it was 20 years ago, so 1997 and 2017, which is the data they looked at, and they categorize it in a variety of different categories: food away from home, so eating out; entertainment, which is kind of the broader classification for experience, alcohol, furniture, rent, healthcare, and education. This is what they came away with. So in 1997, food away from home, 5% of a millennial share of wallet. In 2017, it's 5%. Entertainment, 5% in 1997, 4% in 2017. Alcohol is the same. Furniture is the same. Rent has increased from 8% to 10%. Healthcare has gone from 3% to 5%. And then education, we're spending more on education, 1% to 2%. And so has been zero change in the whole experience category as it relates to the consumer and millennials' share of what they're spending within their wallet. And so these trend lines point to inflation in healthcare and inflation in education, two big policy points as politicians talk about how that impacts American life. And we're seeing that in the data according to Deloitte.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think when people hear that, it makes sense to them when they see the healthcare cost increases on prescription drugs and services and just in general a rise in cost. But also, I'm shocked that education wasn't more than what it was listed on there. I would assume it'd be much, much higher. We recently did a podcast on college affordability and those issues, and it's a staggering amount of money that people coming out of college today, if they had to take out loans, it's a staggering amount of monthly income that takes directly out of their wallet to pay back that loan, just to have the opportunity to do what they really want to do in life and love and be successful. It's kind of, college is kind of that gateway into the middle class and upper middle class, and always has been in many ways. And it's decreasing because of that huge cost burden they have every single month. I myself, on master's level, I took out a $50,000 loan for 1 year of my master's, and that equated over 10 years to $800 a month. So if you're taking out 100, 125, 150,000 for 4 years of college, even though the interest rate on those loans are 3 or 4%, very low, you're still talking about a huge chunk of money that goes back to the government or back to a private lender instead of being able to use that on a house or on a television or on a pair of shoes, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. The other way in which consumers are changing, as the report points out, is that younger consumers are moving towards city centers. I think there was a time in the 20th century in particular, there was a move away from city centers into suburbs and exurbs. And now that trend line is kind of reversing for younger consumers. And so there's more and more younger consumers that are kind of moving in, and younger consumers are far more diverse. There is a dramatic change in the ethnic makeup of our consumer base that our companies need to be aware of. And I think for the most part, I've really latched into this. They spend obviously millions of dollars trying to get consumer insights into the types of folks that are buying footwear and where they're from. But if you look at population by race across generations, baby boomers, 75% of baby boomers are white. And then from there, you have 9% of Latino, and 10% are African American, and 6% are Asian. If you look at millennials, 56% are white, 21% are Latino, 14% are African American, and 9% are Asian. So we are seeing a definite diversification from an ethnicity perspective when it comes to millennials. And then obviously more millennials are moving into city centers. So that's going to change consumer habits, I think, in a way that our brands need to be more aware of.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about your footprint, and we talk about like local for local manufacturing and making sure our warehouses are in their population centers, and where do we place this store based on per capita income and population and foot traffic and all that, and that all the calculations are going to be shifting because of data like this, where we look at in 10 years, and I think it's going to be a real challenge for rural areas to have. Yep. Have when I grew up in a small town, we had options, but those options are going to be strained a little bit because everybody's going to be fighting for space in the cities as populations are going to keep increasing. So to that point, it's, where we send in the shoes to is we're chasing where the traffic is.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's becoming even more and more splintered. So that's why the omni-channel approach, the things that we talked about of meeting consumers where they are, is so important. And so the rural consumer may not have the brick and mortar opportunities that the urban or suburban consumer has, but they at least have access to e-commerce. And I think that creates more and more opportunities for those brands to meet that consumer. The other interesting thing is that consumers, millennials in particular, are delaying major events that usually happen in prior generations within their 20s. So marriage and buying a home and having children, all those things seem to be, millennials are delaying those. And again, it's not because millennials don't want to do those things. A lot of millennials want to get married. A lot of them want to buy homes, and a lot of them want to have children, but they're doing it because their economic standing is not nearly as robust as the baby boomer generation when they were millennials, and in the Generation X generation when they were millennials. And so it shows you the economic burden. It's really the lasting ramifications of the 2008 crisis and how that's impacted consumers who are now coming of age.
Yeah, that's what I think about. I think about economic risk, right? When you calculate your own economic risks and you look at what your wallet is, what you're spending it on, like future outlays, fear of making sure you have enough liquidity and like a rainy day fund and stuff like that. They saw firsthand what happens when markets melt down. Yep. And how people freak out, and how the challenges are. And so in some ways, these folks are a little bit like our grandparents were. I remember my Meemaw and Pawpaw would take tinfoil and fold it back up and stick it back in their cupboard. And I'd be like, what are you doing? And she was like, that was the thing during the Great Depression was you saved everything, you recycled everything, you didn't throw stuff away. They didn't have to do that, but that became a habit. So we have these consumer habits now from this younger generation that saw firsthand a complete meltdown. And to them, it's like, how do I protect myself from getting sucked into that vortex?
Yeah, no, it's so true. And those are life lessons that stay with people for the rest of their lives. And then What we're going through now, it'll be really interesting to see what life lessons we hang on to after the fact. But going back to the number on the share of wallet, I want to get back to that because you made the comment that you thought education would be higher. And the fact is that those stats that we laid out or the report lays out has more to do with the share of wallet. But when you look at price increases within these expenditures that we talked about, we're talking about non-discretionary expenditures from 2007 to 2017. So even over the last 10 years, we're not even talking 20 years. Transportation's up 11%, housing's up 16%, healthcare is up 21%, food is up 26%, and education's up 65%. And so that just shows you that the financial squeeze that is on the millennial that's trying to balance all these things. And that's changing the way they consume footwear and other items.
Yeah, I think if you're having to spend money on things that aren't cool, and you have a risk aversion and you want to have a pool of money there in case something does happen, you want to be responsible, it naturally pulls down on your ability to purchase things. My question would be, when we talk about like for like and things like that, my thing is, when we were growing up, we would go somewhere like a department store and buy a couple of shirts, and the shirts might be $20-$30 a pop, and they were nice, nothing any different than today. But today, those same shirts I can go to H&M and buy for $10 each. So you can. I think prices, there's some deflation with TVs and certain products. I mean, shoes now you can go to Target and Walmart and buy for less, $10 for your kids or $15 or $20, which, in the past, even for the value for what you get now is a lot different too.
Yeah, that's so true. You're right. There are deflationary. I mean, if you look at just costs of apparel and footwear over the last 10, 20 years, they've kind of hung out there and not seen a lot of increases that would create more price pressure on the consumer. The question is now, are these that's a good thing, and that's discretionary stuff that you have to spend on. Right. But it's all these non-discretionary things that see these massive increases that are going to kind of force us to pare back our expenditures and look for more quote unquote experiences, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder too on price points of shoes. Like in the past, did people in the past buy more luxury items than they do today? I don't know I don't know the answer to that. But my guess is the focus of athleisure may also lead to continuing focus on price points, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I can buy a pair of shoes every season instead of buying a $300 pair, and I spend $20 on a pair every season, and it's just seasonal footwear, and I transition it out. I think of things like that too, as like where are we seeing the spin within the industry? Is the behaviors changing? Probably not. I mean, that's kind of what this report is saying is it's kind of the same old stuff. You're still going to get 10% of consumers spending on luxury items, and you're still going to have 90% of the people spending on budget items. So, human nature, as much as we think it changes, sometimes it changes very little.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. One of the things that has come out recently to kind of play off some of this thinking as it relates to where consumers buy and the politics. It's interesting based on, and there's a report that's been put out there, and I'm trying to pull it right now as we talk, but that based on where you live, if you're within 5 or 10 mile radius of a Cracker Barrel, a Tractor Supply store, and maybe one or other two outlets, you're more likely to vote Republican. And if you're closer to Whole Foods and a Nike and an Apple store, you're more likely to vote Democrat. And so even where we are located physically in this nation has a determinant factor of how we perceive politics and how we perceive different policies and how they impact the consumer. And so there's so many different ways to slice and dice all this data to try to understand what the consumer's perspective is. And I think, for the other one, the Cracker Barrel's Bass Pro Shops, it's another one. And these things sound stereotypical because we all joke about the yuppie that goes to Whole Foods and spends twice as expensive on the same product as to the hillbilly that goes to Cracker Barrel and eats mama's griddle pancakes or whatever for breakfast. But there is some truth behind the humor in the sense that where these stores are located, there's a political prediction that can come out of that analysis. And, as much as we like to say we're individuals and, don't tread on me and I'm my own person, we often do fall into these categories that are easily predictable.
Yeah. Tribalism, in some sense.
Social
cues, like things you don't think about, but these little social cues. For me, Cracker Barrel is a Southern food for Yankees. I can't get down with a Cracker Barrel. Not a huge fan. Not for me. But I do laugh when they're like, "Oh, we had Cracker Barrel." They're like, "Oh, how was that?" All right, cool. I'll take you to a hole in the wall that's cinder blocks. We'll see which tastes better with the grits. Oh man, but it is like talking about this stuff's really interesting because these are the things that our brands have to challenge themselves when they look at the data, not just accept it whole bite, but like really break it down and see it, because ultimately it determines what product they're producing, what price they're producing it at, where they're placing the shoe.
Yep.
All these things come around this, and things are shifting here and there. They are shifting here and there, but it's still, to some extent, it's, the pressures are a little bit different, but people still want good shoes at a good price. And I would say more than ever, they want them to be more durable than they have been in the past. It's not losing sight of the basics. It's basic blocking and tackling is what, brands really need to focus on. And then once you get that down, that's where you start looking at the skills receivers and stuff like that, the skills positions where you can start focusing on some of the stuff and zeroing in. But, the flip side is equally true is, never before have brands had more data on who their customers are, through websites and tracking all that data and seeing that. So I'm sure Deloitte had a lot of tools at their disposal if brands opened up that they could look at and see different trend lines. But it does take somebody with a critical mind to take it down a path and then challenge that path. I mean, ultimately you could split all this stuff 8 different ways, but how do you pull out the wisdom out of the knowledge that you have? That's the difference between a successful brand executing to what their customers want and need, or to Apple's point, like creating consumer demand that the consumer never know they actually wanted but did want. That's just genius at that point.
Yeah, that is genius.
But that's kind of like,
when you come to this report, the kicker is this: millennials are dramatically financially worse off than previous cohorts, with a 34% decrease in their net worth since 1996. Yeah. So, and I'm quoting directly from the report here. There's a good reason why millennials are reaching the milestones we talked about earlier later in life. They're significantly financially worse off than their previously similar age cohorts. Since 1996, the net worth of consumers under the age of 35 has fallen by 34%. Home ownership for the cohort declined by more than 4% between 2007 and 2017. And the rise in the education level of millennials hasn't come cheap. Between 2004 and 2017, student debt has increased for consumers under 30 by 160%, so more than doubling. And this is typecasting the millennial as simply being different, overlooks a much bigger factor, that of their economic constraints. So in my mind, when it comes to changing consumer behavior, look how much cash is in their wallet and how much prices have increased for certain expenditures, and you'll come up with a pretty good predictive analysis about where things are headed as it relates to buying your product.
Yeah, I think public policy is going to have to adjust. If we want to continue to see economic growth happen, we're going to have to start seeing 30-year mortgages go to 35 years. And we're going to have to see 10-year student loan packages go to 15 or 20 to spread it out. It's just unsustainable. And there's no reason to have these time limits. We just created these based off of old risk models of trying to have affordability, but also make sure that they pay it off in a timely manner. But ultimately, as we all live older, then what's the point of saying, oh, it has to be 10 years? Like, why does it have to be a 10-year student loan? Why can't it be over the course of their entire career that they pay off a smaller portion?
Right.
So all of a sudden, instead of paying $800 a month and having a huge squeeze, you're paying half that amount, and you're just spreading out a little bit more. So the constraints are a little bit less. But the concerning thing too is the housing, because everybody knows that a house is a capitalist trap. And I mean it in a very good sense, not a negative sense.
Right.
But as soon as you buy a house, you got to fill the house full of stuff. And that means the couches and the chairs and the bookcases and the books. And you have a
aforementioned
big closet,
TVs.
Right? TVs. You have a big closet to fill full of clothes and shoes and everything else. And if people aren't buying, buying houses, are increasing their space, they're not going to keep filling it up with product. So that's a concern too of what's happening with that. So I from a public policy side, I think at some point this idea of loan forgiveness, I think I don't buy into that. I think people still want skin in the game. They want their education. They don't mind a little bit of a struggle. It just can't be a burden, right? Like they don't mind paying off what they struggled with a little bit because it's theirs. There's some ownership to that. But you can't take a chain and a ball around their neck and just, make them carry it the whole time. There's got to be some help somewhere.
Yeah.
So hopefully better policy will come into play to relieve some of that. But it's just, I don't think our public policy people have caught up to that because we have people who are over 70 years old running for president at this point. So I don't think they quite understand the education and economic constraints of somebody who is 25 years old.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Unfortunately.
Totally. Unfortunately.
But
that's what I got.
A few tweaks here and there. I know, but the good thing is a few tweaks here or there. If we did see public policy adjustments, and there were a few tweaks here or there. I mean, you could see a completely different constraint on millennials where it would free up capital, I think, to increase spending levels and increase, all those issues. And I think, that's the good thing is, I would gander to say like that pushing from 10 to 15 would not be that big of a push, be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Congress, I mean, so I don't know. But it's good stuff to think about and chat about.
It is. Yeah. And I will, we'll put the link to the report in the notes of the podcast. So check it out down below and you can access the full report. I think it's well worth reading.
Yeah, 100%. Any of these things where we can look at people buying our product is worth reading and thinking about and changing the way we market and sell shoes. I mean, we talked, previously on a past episode about supply chains and how people are having to redo their strategies almost monthly at this point. I think it's the same thing with product. You get a product in and you should look at your marketing campaign and not run the same one, even if it's your core product. You got to touch up words, you got to touch up phrases, you got to put it on different platforms. And that should be a constant struggle that people have to go through it to get the right message and get it to the right person the right way they want to receive it.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we have a segment, Jasmine?
Yeah, we do.
What are we doing today?
Well, we can. Yes. So I was watching one of our videos from Tiffany Beers, which is our footwear innovation advisor here at FDRA, and it was on like bamboo and how to integrate bamboo into footwear. And I was just thinking when I was watching it, I was like, wow, we've done so much stuff on innovation. We have a whole sustainability event, and I don't own anything that I feel like is made with sustainability in mind. So I was wondering if you guys have seen anything come out recently that is based like a shoe, with that in mind and that being like the biggest priority, or if you've bought any recent purchases around that.
Yeah,
well, I know, Andy, you've been working on this pretty religiously, so
yeah,
there's a lot out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I just see a lot of brands starting to incorporate new materials, trying to be more sustainable, trying to be more eco-conscious as they do things and integrate. It is hard because I think ultimately you've got to hit similar price points season over season. So if you're integrating in something new, you have to make sure that it functions for the shoe. So if you got a running shoe, I don't know that bamboo is going to be something that you want. It may not be flexible enough or durable enough.
Yeah.
Certainly better foam, different types of foam, recycled foam, if you can get the same kind of push. But yeah, I mean, you've got Merrill has been working on biodegradable shoes. You've got Dr. Scholl's has come out with some really cool shoes where they use a lot of recycled content and have a whole different look and feel. Decker's brand's been working on recycled foam. Nike's always coming out with something really cool and unique. But I think the idea is if you can think in the space where certain shoes can use bamboo and certain shoes can use these other like products, and you can sell it at a price point that makes sense for the consumer. What eventually happens is the more the material is used, it'll filter down into other price points. It's just like innovation. So all the shoes that we see at Walmart right now that are knitted uppers that they're selling started because Nike 10 years ago created the Flyknit, and it's eventually filtered down on a price point where they can make it. So eventually the hope is the same thing happens with eco-conscious or sustainable materials, where these will start to filter into product because it makes price sense and it makes good, environmental sense to do that too. But there's better processes, I would say. If you think of it from a material standpoint, there might be a few companies really doing material stuff, but everybody's doing better in terms of process at the factory. So better productivity, less waste, recycled waste, things like that. So yeah, I think it'll filter into all our shoes at some point, hopefully. Yeah. Just my thought. But yeah, I think, Merrell's a leader. Dr. Scholl's has got some great stuff. Decker's, Teva just came out and saying all their straps are going to be 100% recycled. And
I forgot about the Rothy's too. That's like
Allbirds is constantly trying to do every aspect of their shoe and their supply chain sustainable. Trying to add sustainability to it. So
that should be my next purchase.
Yeah, there's bits and pieces coming here and there, and some shoes, could do one recycled material, but that's on the right path. Some people will just create a whole new product line from waste, or try to do everything as sustainable as possible. And my whole thing is just try to do better one day at a time, and one piece of the shoe at a time, and eventually you can get there. Hopefully, I don't know. Matt, thoughts?
No, man, you covered it all. I think you nailed it.
Too much.
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. Well, folks, this is another episode of Shoe In Show, where we talked about consumer trends, consumer behavior patterns and shifts. It's something that we constantly struggle with and talk about because it is so vitally important that we understand what the customer wants, delivers it, how they want it, where they want it, what type of product they want. We hope you've enjoyed it. You can drop us a line at shoeinshow.com. Let us know what you thought. If you want to come on, if you have a brand that you think would be a great fit for us to interview on any topic, let us know that too. We are on every audio platform known to man. Please subscribe. Please rate us. But on behalf of Jasmine, Matt, and myself, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.